Okay, so we're about to dive into the intellectual heart of a massive world civilization. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, what we find is probably the exact opposite of what you think it is.
All right, quick question. When you hear the words Indian philosophy, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Seriously, picture it. For most of us, it's a pretty specific image, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing you're thinking of things like meditation, yoga, maybe some epic tales full of gods and wise gurus. And look, that's totally part of the picture, no doubt. But that's just the surface. What's really going on underneath, that's where things get wild.
So, what if I told you that that entire image we have in our heads is actually the exception, not the rule, and that the real story, the core of it all, can be summed up with just one number?
Because get this, out of the 9, count them, 9 foundational schools of classical Indian philosophy, we're talking the absolute pillars of the tradition. A full 8 of them don't have a creator god at all. They're basically atheistic. So wait, how does that even work?
Okay, so first things first. Let's dig into that huge gap between what we think we know about Indian thought and what was actually going on. And to really get our heads around this, well, it's kind of a language problem. See, our Western words like religion or atheism, they just don't map perfectly onto this. The thinkers back then, they were playing a completely different ballgame.
And here it is. This is the absolute key. For us in the West, the big dividing line is, do you believe in God? Simple. But in classical India, the main philosophical question was something totally different. It was, do you accept the authority of these ancient texts, the Vedas? You could totally say, yes, I accept the Vedas, making you orthodox, and in the next breath say, but a creator God? Nah, don't need one. That single shift in thinking, it changes absolutely everything.
So instead of a concept like religion, the central idea is dharma. Now, don't think of it as a list of rules handed down from on high. It's more like a law of nature, like gravity. It's the underlying cosmic order, a system of ethics and duty that just works. It runs all by itself, no divine CEO required.
All right, so let's see what this looks like in the real world. We're going to do a quick tour of those 9 foundational schools. They're called the darśanas, which is a beautiful word that basically means perspectives or ways of seeing. And here's what that tour looks like from 30,000 feet. The whole idea of a creator God, it's not just missing, it's a tiny minority opinion. We're talking about the mainstream of classical Indian thought, a whopping 89% of it being atheistic in this sense. This wasn't some wacky fringe idea, it was the default setting.
Okay, let's break this down. Take a look at the top half there. You've got schools like Sankhya and Mimamsa. They're considered orthodox, right? They accept the Vedas. But then slide your eyes over to that last column. See that? No creator God. And then you get the unorthodox schools, like Jainism and Buddhism. They reject the Vedas and a creator. It's really only when you get to one school, Vedanta, that you start to see a few sub-schools that are actually theistic.
And then there's the Cārvāka school. These guys were the ultimate rebels, total hardcore materialists. Their rule was simple. If I can't see it, touch it, or taste it, it doesn't exist. Their whole philosophy was basically, hey, this life is it, so you might as well enjoy it. You can just imagine them in the middle of all these deep, serious debates, just shouting, live a little.
Okay, so this raises a huge question, right? If there's no creator God, no divine judge, then how do you explain stuff like morality, the self, justice? How does a concept like karma even work if there's no one keeping score?
So how did they pull it off? How do you build a moral universe from scratch? Well, for most schools, the starting point was the idea of the Atman. Think of it as an eternal, conscious self or soul. But here's the kicker. The Atman wasn't something made by a god. It was just there, a fundamental, uncreated piece of reality, like space or time.
But, and this is so important, even that core idea of an eternal self was up for grabs. Nothing was sacred. It was all debated. You had Buddhism, which famously argued for anatman, or no self, saying, we're not a single thing, just a bundle of processes that are always changing. And of course, you had the Cārvākas again, saying, nope, consciousness is just what your brain does, and when you die, the lights go out. The end.
So what about karma? How does that work without a god to hand out rewards and punishments? Well, you have to stop thinking about it like a cosmic justice system. It's much more like a law of physics. An action you take, driven by a certain intention, automatically creates its own result. The consequence is literally baked into the action. It's a perfectly self-sustaining system. It just runs. No manager needed. Okay, so if this whole massive tradition wasn't built on faith in a creator, what was it built on? The answer, and this is the real takeaway, is a deep, almost fanatical commitment to logic and rational thought.
I mean, these thinkers were obsessed with one central question. How do we actually know anything? They developed these incredibly sophisticated systems for figuring that out, called the pramanas, the valid means of knowing. They would argue for centuries about what counts as proof. Is it just what you can see, or can we trust logic? Can we trust testimony? The entire tradition was built on debate and argument, not just blind faith.
So when you put it all together, what you get is a complete reframing of what Indian philosophy even is. Its defining feature isn't just spirituality, you know? It's this incredible, relentless, centuries-long project of using pure reason to figure out how reality works.
And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If a huge chunk of one of the world's oldest and richest philosophical traditions could build entire systems of morality, reality, and logic, all without needing a creator god at the center, well, what does that say about the assumptions we might be making without even realizing it?